Greetings. I'm back. This is Briannah Joy channel, and it has some disturbing news of a media figure that I'm very fond of. She's been terminated from the Hill for her views and her interview with a Israeli family that have a hostage person of the family in Gaza. Okay? So, I have done a couple of videos on her, and I noticed that videos doesn't get views, but I know why now. It's bigger than her or the YouTube, okay? The power goes up and up. So, I'm gonna speed it up, and we're gonna get straight to this person that has his YouTube channel. I'm gonna let him go and talk. I sped the video up so you go straight to it. Here we go.
British interests bear a stark resemblance to the actions of some Palestinian militants today, who are attempting to address the pains of occupation. The Israeli lobby recently targeted a quintessential media personality, Briannah Joy Gray, known for her critical stance on some of Israel's narratives following the events of October. The Hill terminated her career over what appeared to be normal journalistic skepticism during an interview with an Israeli hostage family. The open-minded thinker show has reviewed the video, and it is confident that Gray's approach was likely an innocent, critical examination of some of the hostage family's claims, rather than a dismissal of the horrors of October 7th.
You specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right, thanks for joining. Stick around, more rising coming up next.
Gray's dismissal strengthens the argument that Israel does not tolerate criticism and utilizes its lobby in America to silence dissenting voices and media personalities. Consider the case of Mehdi Hassan, who was fired from MSNBC at the onset of the conflict for merely questioning the prevailing falsehoods, masking the distress of the Palestinians, and exploring why resistance persists in the region. Hassan condemned the atrocities committed by Palestinian fighters, but also called for proper condemnation of the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, for their terror-like operations against Palestinians. Candace Owens is another example of the fate awaiting independent journalists who criticize Israel. She has been effectively silenced on YouTube, whether due to the platform's regulations or self-imposed silence. Her critical stance on Israel may have contributed to her 2-month absence from YouTube. This pattern of silencing critics is something Israel excels at, with Briannah Joy Gray being the latest victim. However, Gray remains defiant. In an interview with Glenn Greenwald, she expressed her determination to expose the truth for the sake of justice for Palestine, undeterred by her dismissal.
Yes and no. So I have not had any communication with anybody from the Hill about the firing. Producer Joanne Levine has not returned any of my phone calls. I immediately reached out after I received this letter, in part because it wasn't clear to me from the text whether the 30 days referenced in the letter meant that they expected me to finish out the month, or whether or not Wednesday was my last day in office. And I texted her several times saying, look, I don't need to have a conversation with you. Can you just clarify that one point? So I can start talking about this publicly, you know what I mean? So no, to date, I've heard from nobody except for Robbie, who has been on vacation and who is frustrated by all of this as well.
But to be clear, Robbie is Robbie Swami, who's your co-host, with whom you have a lot of disagreements in Israel.
Yes, very publicly on the show. That's the whole point of the show. But behind the scenes, off camera, he's very supportive of our of what we're trying to do on the show, of the project, of the show itself, and is very protective of it, and was very frustrated and disappointed in the actions that the Hill took. But I want to add some more context. I have been under a great deal of pressure for months and months now to tone down my Israel coverage at Rising. It started, I think, really in earnest about 6 months ago or so, when there was a radical shift in the staff at the Hill, where basically every single person who worked there was either fired or pushed out, made the work environment was so difficult that they chose to leave, basically. And as new staff replaced the particularly new producers, who exerted much more editorial control over content than had ever been exerted before, they particularly put a lot of scrutiny on coverage of Israel and started to refer to our coverage as an Israel block. So we do about 8 to 12 blocks, segments a day. And they started to refer to this idea of Israel block, where we could only do one segment on Israel. And as you can imagine, Glenn, given the plethora of stories that come out on a daily basis, some of them are domestic politics issues, some of them are straight news reporting about whatever bombing campaign most recently happened in, let's say, Rafah. Some of them are about the choice to have Netanyahu comes to speak to Congress. You might have a story about what happened on a college campus protest. You might have a story on. You can easily do 12 segments on Israel every day. And they were segments that were very popular with rising audience. Unlike some other, I've been on the other side of that, right? I've had to talk about issues that I'm the foil for. I'm the heel for with that particular very ideologically mixed audience. But on Israel, it was a double header of a lot of clicks, earns money for the company, and it's also something that's very newsy, and it's something that ideologically I personally cared a lot about. And yet, unlike other subjects that were very newsy, let's say we talked about a lot of COVID coverage, talked about some culture issues with trans issues and the like, there was never the same resistance to covering it as much as the audience wanted as there was when it came to Israel. Not at all. In fact, the numbers of the Hill have been down significantly again since this whole staff turnover earlier this year, in part because it almost feels, frankly, like they've been trying to sabotage the show
from the open-minded thinker.
For example,
Give big ups to the open-minded thinker. Thank you very much.
We're allowed to respond to clips, and as you know, Glenn,
The
so much
open-minded
of
thinker.
doing a kind of internet show is responding to viral clips, whether they're, Tucker Carlson sat down with an interview for Thomas Massey, or Whoopi Goldberg said something silly on The View. I mean, that's so much of what the coverage is. But there was this decision to not disallow us from doing that. That caused a real steep decline in the kinds of segments we could do. There have been I've been outright told that certain kinds of guests couldn't come on. For example, I was told that Norm Finkelstein, you brought him up earlier, the foremost scholar on Gaza in the entire country, if not the world, was banned because they said he was a, quote, Holocaust denier. This is someone whose parents survived the Holocaust themselves. So this is the kind of pressure that we've been under, and as much as you see me, arguing with Robbie on air, that is our job. In many ways, it has been more tense behind the scenes because of the editorial control that they have been trying to wrest over me personally. I think Robbie, frankly, he'll speak for himself at some point, I'm sure, but has been under a lot of pressure to push back against me in ways that maybe are even artificial to his own belief structure, because the show desired, people at the company desire there to be balance, even if this is not necessarily an issue where there are both sides. And I think that's ultimately what led to the interview, which is being held up as the pretext for my firing. Let me interrupt you there, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. We're going to show that clip. I wanted to talk about it. But just to give a little context to this, I've definitely been noticing that you have been kind of ascending as a target pro-Israel fanatics. I mean, they've been really going after you. You did this debate recently where it was very contentious, and the supposed neutral host, Konstantin Kizin, began attacking you in very vicious ways, calling you a DEI Barbie, and then pathetically and cowardly denying that he was referring in any way to your race. Yeah, exactly. It could be you should change your Twitter name to that. But, clearly the fact that you are out there, that you do have this kind of platform in corporate media where you've been using it to be so vocal in your criticism of Israel has really made you public enemy number one. But as you say, that really escalated when this very short snippet of an interview that you conducted with, I believe she's the sister of a hostage in Gaza. Is that correct? She's the sister of a hostage. At the very end of the interview, so there was no context to it, but they tried to claim that you were essentially mocking and rolling your eyes at a rape victim. Let's show this video that caused so much disturbance.
Thank you, me too. And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right, thanks for joining. Stick around. More Rising coming up next.
Now, Briannah, I honestly never knew that there were so many people on the right who embraced this phrase, believe women. But ever since October 7th, they've been kind of chanting and marching around with their fist in the air, chanting this like they're Gloria Steinem or something. I mean, before October 7th, the idea was, no, we don't believe women, we want to see evidence. You can't question the evidence. I guess that is yet another view that changed. But what happened there? Were you mocking and rolling your eyes at Israeli rape victims, or explain what it is that you were doing?
Of course not.
Of course she wasn't.
I am hesitant to give the Hill more clicks at this point, but I do encourage people to go and listen to the whole interview, because there's a couple of things. One is that this is not someone that the Hill reached out to. They weren't looking for a guest who was a family member of a hostage or looking at the perspective of what those family members are going to. This person offered themselves up and very specifically when making a request, said that they wanted to talk to me. And when our producer Joanne forwarded the request to me,
Sound like
I immediately red flagged them because it seemed to me that this was someone who had a personal vendetta and agenda against me. And I was cautioning Joanne against having yet another person on that wanted to litigate what they found distasteful about my own personal political views in the context of a show where I, as a host, really don't have the opportunity to go back and forth. I have to, moderate a show, be gracious to the person who has come there, but when they sort of open the door to personal attack, it upsets the balance in a way that I don't think is really appropriate for the show. But I was in a position where I was under a great deal of pressure, once again, to have balance in the coverage that was happening on the show, despite the fact that my radars were one of the only well-performing segments that were happening on the Hill at the time because of the decline in viewership that I was alluding to before. So throughout this interview, she first was, I think, very fine. I think her perspective is valuable and necessary. We were talking about her sister, how hard it is for her to be separated from her. It was, a compelling story. But then she started to interject political claims into the narrative. She made an Islamophobic comment suggesting that there was going to be terrorism in Dearborn, Michigan, because I suppose it's the largest Arab American community, so we should be afraid of what might happen in Dearborn. She the now well discredited mass rape hoax on October 7th, suggesting that the Zaka organization that perpetuated many of those claims was credible, and that if I only had listened to Zaka, that I would understand what had happened on October 7th, and that her sister could be under similar threats of violence. And certainly it could be the case that her sister could be under threats of sexual violence. But she forced me, frankly, to push back against discredited, false claims about what did not happen on October 7th. And as I did that, she grew increasingly agitated. She would pivot between saying that she didn't want to talk about politics. And I said, okay, well, tell me about your sister. We'd love to hear about your sister.
Can't tell the truth, baby.
Politics back into it. When I tried to ask her how she felt as the family of a hostage victim, about how Benjamin Netanyahu has been handling the return of the hostages. He has been protested, as you well know, in Israel for not prioritizing the return of the hostages and instead saying that he wants to obliterate before thinking about agreeing to any of these ceasefire deals. She, again, pivoted away, said she's not a politician, doesn't know about politics. But then, of course, toward the end, increasingly tried to make it personal about me. I pushed back a little bit that you saw there at the end. And frankly, that eye roll and exasperation is more about the stupidity of my producer making the choice to have this guest on who very predictably was going to make it into a personal attack about me than about that woman herself. And I would point out that Hind Zig and another guest, Israeli guest, or I think she was actually an Iranian Zionist guest, had done the exact same thing when they'd come on and then clipped the episodes after to launch very personal media attacks against me with the swarm of bots that we now know from reporting over the past week is coming directly from the Israeli government.
This deep sacrifice for the truth by Briannah Joy Gray led us to make some researches about her. Having lived among Arabs in Saudi Arabia, she shares a similar conviction with the idea behind the open-minded thinkership.
Everyone said to go to a tradition.